Hi, folks. Thanks so much for joining. All right, we're going to get started now. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar on campus bike parking best practices. My name is Amelia Neptune, and I'm the director of the Bicycle Friendly America program at the League of American Bicyclists, which includes the Bicycle Friendly University program, which I believe is why you're all here. If you're not familiar with the BFU program, we have an online application with annual deadlines, recently closed in August. For this year, we give out awards, bronze through platinums, for schools who meet our criteria, and we give everyone who applies, whether they receive an award or not, feedback on how to continue to improve. So even if you don't feel like you're quite ready to earn the award, feel free to apply just to get that feedback and figure out how to get started. The BFU program is open to all colleges and universities of any size in the US, and you can learn more about that program and our criteria for awards at bikeleague.org/university. This presentation is more focused on bike parking and campus bike parking best practices, but I'll be happy to answer any questions about the BFU program at the end of today's presentations if those come up. And just an aside, like I said, we just closed our 2018 applications, and we'll be announcing those awards later this fall. And we're about to open our 2019 application. So if you plan to apply in the next year, be on the lookout for announcements on that from the league. And that deadline will be August of 2019. So a little bit of background. I've been at the league for almost 5 years, and before that, I worked as the campus bicycle coordinator for the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So the BFU program and topics like campus bike parking are really dear to my heart. And I know from working on a campus before and now working with campuses all across the country that well-planned, high-quality bike parking is really essential to becoming a bicycle-friendly campus. Especially when you have students living on campus, it's just so critical to make sure that people have enough places to park their bikes, high-quality bike parking, so that they know they can really rely on always having a safe, secure place to store their bike, whether it's overnight or during a quick stop for class or at the dining hall. And I actually first started working with ground control in my previous role at the U of I. So I've worked with them directly from the campus perspective, as a vendor, and now they've been a wonderful partner to the League's Bicycle Friendly University program. I especially want to thank them not only for hosting today's webinar and sharing their expertise with you all, but also for sponsoring the Bicycle Friendly University program. We really appreciate their generous support and ongoing partnership. So today you'll be hearing from Michael Owsley from Ground Control, and you'll also hear from one of our platinum level bicycle friendly universities, UC Davis. Ramon Zavala will share what UC Davis campus has done to improve bike parking over the years and how that's helped them earn platinum status. So before we get started, just a couple housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll post the recording to the BFU website, which again is bikeleague.org/university. I also typed that into the chat, which I think you should all be able to see. And so I definitely encourage folks who have to leave early or want to see it again to revisit that, and also share this presentation with folks from your campus planning department or administration or decision makers who you may need to convince to spend the funding on bike parking. There's going to be a lot of really great content in today's webinar, so definitely use and share that recording long after today. As you probably all have noticed, all attendees are muted, but you can type questions into the chat box on your screen at any time, and we'll save time at the end to answer your questions. So if we're not able to type responses to you, we should be able to verbally answer questions at the end. So feel free to keep the questions coming throughout the presentation, and we should have time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael from Ground Control.
Alrighty, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Amelia, for the introduction. First off, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Ground Control Systems and what we do. We are a leading specialty contractor of innovative bike and board parking solutions in North America, focusing primarily on university campuses and student housing. We have partnered with the League today as a resource for schools looking to become a bicycle-friendly university or improve their current status. We have worked with hundreds of schools, many of which of our Platinum and Gold members themselves, such as our special guest speaker today. Our goal here at Ground Control Systems is to help universities improve their overall bicycle infrastructure and increase ridership on their campuses. We are finding that bike parking is often an afterthought, causing ineffective solutions to be implemented with haste, rather than discussing proper bike parking in the early stages. Overall, we want to get students out of cars, active on bikes, and improve the overall community wellness, health, and safety. With that, let's quickly touch on some of the benefits of proper bike parking on campus. First off are the economic benefits. And this is, of course, a benefit to you, the campus. Having a successful bike parking infrastructure is economically beneficial for any school. Bike parking is one of the cheapest, easiest, and most effective ways for any campus to utilize their space. According to Bikeonomics, for each vehicle, bike parking takes up 10 times less space and costs up to 300 times less than car parking. Next is a direct benefit to your students. Active students are happier, more focused, and healthier, spending less on healthcare than those not as physically active. As you can see, the health benefits are extensive. And this is only the beginning. Currently, a partner of ours, the Specialized Foundation, is successfully studying the improvements that cycling has on ADHD. All right. And last is the benefit and impact that it has on the environment. Bicycles are zero-emission vehicles that can help colleges reach their carbon neutral and sustainability goals. Because of this, bike parking plays a role in meeting environmental standards on campus, such as LEED and Cal Green. And as you can see, the future is green. With many campuses making efforts towards sustainability, some of these efforts include over 200,000 individuals that have been recognized by LEED for integrating green practices and materials into their buildings. There have been 93 colleges and universities that have signed on to the climate commitment from Second Nature, which is committing to accelerating climate inaction through higher education. There has been 809 institutions that have registered for the AASHE Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, which helps measure and improve sustainability. And of course, there's 182 colleges and universities that have been recognized by the League of American Bicyclists as bicycle-friendly universities. There are many more benefits that could be covered, but for now, let's move on to planning. All right, let's take a look at a few rules of thumb for planning your bike parking. It's not always easy to figure out just how much bike parking you need and where it should go, but there are some key things to keep in mind and tools that can help. First off, identify your problem areas. Hone in on all highly congested areas that have frequent short and long-term visitors, such as student centers, arenas, and other event centers. Something to look for are areas that have bikes leaned against trees or that are piled up. These are obviously problem areas. Local ordinances may sometimes influence campus guidelines as well. They can also be used as a resource to make sure you're providing enough parking for relevant buildings and the student population. Some tools, such as pedestrian and bicycle count programs, user surveys, and other data collecting methods, can help you determine the best location and how many bike parking spaces are needed. These methods can pinpoint high traffic areas, bike abandonment, and give a detailed heat map of where bicycle parking is most needed. Next up is location, location, location. Location covers more than just problem areas. You need to keep a few key guidelines in mind when installing racks. Make sure your racks are in heavily populated areas in clear sight. We can't tell you how many times we've seen racks down alleyways and between buildings that aren't used or have bike frames and wheels stolen. It is very important to ensure your students are not putting their property at risk when using the racks. Next, if you're providing indoor parking, such as student housing, signage is extremely important. If students can't find the racks, they can't use them. And last, to be ADA compliant, always remember that racks shouldn't interfere with walkways and sidewalks. Now, let's move into layouts. Layouts can be the most difficult because there's a lot to take into consideration. Before we go into the different layouts, here are a few things you should consider before planning your bike parking room. For outdoor parking, plan around trees, curbs, benches, and other objects. On the flip side, for indoor parking, plan around HVAC ducts, fire hydrants, containers, and other obstructions. Also for indoor parking, you may need to confirm the ceiling height is compatible with vertical and two-tier racks. And the last thing is, be sure that you can accommodate for cargo bikes, e-bikes, or maybe even other sorts of bikes, such as bike trailers. Now here at Ground Control Systems, we like to group our layouts into 3 categories: rider-friendly, max density, and balanced. To rider-friendly. Rider-friendly layouts are going to consider the user first. These layouts have little to no lifting required and have more space than the minimum requirement between bikes for easy access and unrestricted movement. These layouts follow AP/BP guidelines and will give students the easiest to use experience. However, though, these layouts use the most space and accommodate the less bikes. On the opposite end is max density, and it's just that, the maximum number of bikes that you can fit into an area, while still providing the proper spacing. These layouts are really designed for the busiest area with the least amount of available space. Typically, vertical and two-tier racks are used as they fit the most bikes into a space. And then finally, we have balanced. Balanced is the perfect blend of rider-friendly and max density. In these layouts, you will usually see a combination of high-density racks, such as two-tier racks and vertical racks, as well as floor-mount racks, such as the varsity bike dock. These are the most popular layouts for providing a good user experience for students while still optimizing your space. Though you may already have an idea of which layouts will work for you on your campus, it's always a good idea to consult our experts to get customized CAD drawing layouts to ensure that you are ADA compliant and making the best use of your space. Okay, let's move on to installation. Installation can be a monster, and is something we often tell schools to leave to us. Often, the cost to install the racks for a school can be more than the racks themselves if they're not careful. Here are a few things to keep in mind if you plan to tackle installation in-house. First, setbacks and loading zones. These will depend on what kind of layout you want to install. As we mentioned before, the difference in spacing will create either a rider-friendly, max density, or balanced layout. Both inverted U's and bike docks, such as the varsity, require a 48 to 60-inch loading zone. However, the varsity only requires 32-inch rack-to-rack spacing for the aisleway, as opposed to the inverted U, which requires 36 inches. Vertical and two-tier systems call for a bit more detail. As you can see in the images, vertical racks also call for a minimum ceiling height of 92 inches, and two-tier systems require 102 inches. Some vertical and two-tier systems will also call for 72-inch loading zone, as opposed to the original 48 to 60 inches. And I cannot stress enough, we always recommend reaching out to our experts when creating layouts and installing your racks, even more so when you're creating an indoor bike room, as there is a good deal to consider when installing indoors. Another important aspect of installation is going to be what kind of substrate you're installing into. Certain substrates require additional pieces, and some racks do not install into all substrates. Here's a breakdown of what you may encounter when installing racks in ground. Concrete is compatible with all surface-mounted racks and is the easiest surface to install into. It requires a wedge anchor or drop-in anchors for installation. Asphalt or pavement, which is the most common when installing outdoors, requires asphalt anchors with epoxy. If there is concrete underneath the asphalt or pavement, you will need to use a freestanding mount or specialty anchor system. Pavers will require a freestanding system, such as a rail, or you will need to pour concrete and use an in-ground mount. This surface calls for rack embedment or additional stingers. And then the final ground-mounted substrate is grass or dirt. And this will need a stable base to anchor the rack. Or you will need a freestanding system, as mentioned before, which is a rail system. Just like the pavers, without a freestanding system, concrete will need to be poured and possibly stingers used and fall into the ground. Excuse me for a second, I'm gonna take a drink of water. All right. Now, moving on to different wall substrates. The first being the most common, which again is concrete. It is compatible with all wall-mounted racks and will require strike anchors or wedge anchors. Bricks or blocks are also compatible with all wall-mounted racks and call for strike anchors. Steel-studded walls are complicated and will need to be properly engineered for cantilever loads. To install in these walls, you will need to toggle nut-style fasteners, unistrut-style rails, or ledger boards. And finally, wood-studded walls. These will also need to be properly engineered for cantilever loads, and you will need to use ledger boards with lag screws to install these. One last point when installing is obstructions. This may seem fairly intuitive, however, if not considered, can be extremely costly and even may cause you to have to redesign your entire layout. Always be wary of any obstructions that may affect your install, such as piping, sewage, lines, trees, drains, etc. Obviously, this is a good deal of information, and we don't expect everyone to memorize it all. So after this presentation, in the follow-up, we will be sending out our guidebook that includes all this information in it. Again, though, we do urge everyone to contact our experts before installing. All right, let's move on to Bike Parking 101. All right. Bike parking is separated into two categories, Class 1, or long-term parking, and Class 2, short-term parking. Class 1 parking, or long-term parking, requires protection from most, if not all, elements. This parking class is usually found in student housing or for staff. Bike lockers or any bike rack can be used in conjunction with rooms, cages, supervised spaces, or other facilities, as long as weather protection and security needs are met. Recommendations for Class 1 parking are usually high-density racks, such as two-tier systems and vertical bike racks. Lift assist racks or on-ground racks may be needed to accommodate all demographics. One other thing to remember is the rack should be secure and compatible with a U-lock. The storage space containing the racks should also be lockable. Now let's discuss Class 2. Class 2 parking or short-term parking is intended for only a couple hours. The right location, as previously discussed, is very important when installing Class 2 parking. Racks should be in high-traffic, well-lit areas next to building entrances. And of course, also these racks should be compatible with U-locks as well. Now that you have a higher level of understanding, let's dive in and discuss what makes a good rack versus a bad rack. This is an area that you really need to be careful. Often needed features of a rack are left out, which can make or break the success of your bicycle parking. For instance, the Google campus now refuses to use two-tier racks because they purchased racks without lift assist, and the users had a terrible experience. All right, so what makes a good rack? Got a nice little video here that helps illustrate my point. You want your rack to not only be compatible with a U-lock, but also capable of locking at least 2 points of contact with the bike. The frame, the rack, and one wheel should all be lockable at the same time. Now, got another wonderful little video for this one. All right, another feature for in-ground mounted racks that's very important is a wheel well or trough. This will keep the bike upright, promote proper parking, and keep bikes organized and compact. Something else to look for in both Class 1 and Class 2 bike racks is an offset design. This design staggers the wheels, which prevents handlebar conflict as well as scratches and damaging other bikes. Okay, now, as we discussed, two-tier systems must have lift assist. This is very important and sometimes forgotten when researching these products. The lift assist enables the user to lift no more than 2 inches off the ground. Anything without lift assist, the user will be expected to lift the entire weight over the bike of their head to fit it into the rack. And there we go. All right. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's move on to what creates a bad bike rack. Now, bad bike racks can often hide under the guise of a good rack, often missing critical features such as the aforementioned lift assist. One type of rack to definitely look out for is any rack that is tracked with hooks. These racks do nothing for the integrity of the bike and will cause serious damage. They are also dangerous for the user as they have to move a good deal of the weight of the bike to get around or lock it. Next up is grid racks. Grid racks, though used consistently, bend wheels of the bikes, cause damage to neighboring bikes, and do not promote a sound footprint. Users tend to want to park their bikes horizontally along the rack, taking up 8 spaces simply because they do not want to damage their wheel or have other bikes parked next to it. And then finally, we have wave racks. All right. Yeah, similar to the grid rack, the wave rack does not promote a sound footprint and allows bikes to slide down and scatter around the rack. These racks are terrible for the bike and do nothing for the user or security for the bike. If you would like to see any of these videos, they are available on the website for how to lock to wave rack, grid rack, etc. So you can see the wonderful animation at work. All right, so now, just as important as the style of the rack is materials and finishes. The last thing you want to do is install 500 racks and then have to replace them a year later. Here are a few features to look for in a finish or material before choosing a rack. All right, hollow racks with a closed base often build moisture internally and rust from the inside out, reducing the lifespan of the product. Look for racks with an open design that not only drain moisture, but allow the interior to be coated with a protective finish to prevent corrosion. Now, what's best for the bike? Metal bike racks can scrape, dent, or chip bike frames. Look for products that have a protective guard around the lockable loops to prevent metal-to-metal contact. If the product doesn't have a guard, thermoplastic finishes are more bicycle-friendly than galvanized or steel. And another thing to keep in mind is square tubing is more difficult to cut than round tubing. And also solid materials will be the most theft resistant. Now on the screen you can see a breakdown of finishes, their suited environments, and their warranties. This will help you decide which finish is ideal for your school. First is thermoplastic coated steel. This is our patented Duraplast. It is the highest rated in marine or snow and helps prevent rust for long periods of time. It withstands direct impact and damage from the elements. It also comes with a 20-year warranty. Now, stainless steel is also extremely durable, has long lifespan, and low maintenance, and is also most resistant to cutting. The only negative thing is metal-to-metal contact with your bike or bikes. This also comes with a 20-year warranty. Next up is hot-dipped galvanized metal. It is an abrasion-resistant, durable finish that requires low maintenance and rarely needs touch-ups. It's also durable in harsh environments. The negative with this one is it typically only comes with a 10-year warranty as opposed to the 20-year warranty. And then finally, there's powder coat. It's the most inexpensive finish, but of course is low durability and will chip and pill when exposed to metal. It also needs regular maintenance and comes with a 1-year warranty, which you can assume that the reason it only comes with a 1-year warranty is because it doesn't last very long. All right. Now that we've covered that, I would like to share with you guys a few examples of funding from other schools that have implemented bike parking. Because you should know you don't need an enormous budget to install quality bike parking. So here are a few examples. At Georgia Tech, their student government received over $26,000 from its SGA for its proposal to add bike racks and lines to several areas of campus. Then there's also student sustainability committees can get involved. The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign was awarded $225,000 from the SSC for bike parking. The campus is now recognized as a bronze level by the League of American Bicyclists, as where before they had barely anything. Something else, environmental coalitions. At Virginia Tech, they installed more than 250 bike parking spaces, a total of $42,000 funding from the Green RFP program and the Bike Bus and Walk program. Now, you don't always have to rely on groups around campus to come up with the funding. You could also use vehicle parking fees. The platinum-ranked University of Minnesota Twin Cities uses income from their vehicle parking permits to entirely fund their alternative transportation program. You can also look to outside of campus to private donations. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology used a private donation to fund bicycle upgrades and facilities on their campus. And then finally, you can talk to us. Here at Ground Control Systems, we love to offer discounts on high quality purchases and wholesale university prices. All right, now, as you can see, we have worked with many universities across the nation, and I could speak about any of the great solutions we've come up with. But fortunately for us today, we have Ramon Zavala, the Transportation Demand Manager at UC Davis, which is also a platinum bicycle-friendly university and one of the standards in campus bike parking here, to speak about his experiences. So without further ado, stage is yours, Ramon.
All right, hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. I'm going to steal the screen now. Do that, or at least the person who can speak. Oh, thank you, Kevin, for chiming in on chat. All right. My name is Ramon Zavala. I am the Transportation Demand Manager here at the University of California, Davis. I've been here for just over 1 year, but I had about 7 years at the University of California, Irvine, doing exactly the same job. Transportation demand management here is basically what some might refer to as the sustainable transportation program, alternative transportation, sustainable commutes, etc. But it's all of that transit-focused bike, walk, van pool, carpool, etc. And our massive bike program is under my purview as well here. So I'm going to talk a bit about bike parking, the history of bike parking as well at UC Davis. And the way we're looking and the speed at which I speak, we should have time at the end for questions should you have them. But by all means, if you have a question, type it into the chat. And I'm trying to keep my eyeballs on both my own presentation and your messages. So put a question in there. I might just throw it in while I'm giving my talk. And here we go. All right, so that's my contact information right there. I would supply my phone number, but chances are you would never actually catch me. It would either go directly to voicemail, and I would check that eventually, or you just might not actually get a hold of me. So if you have any questions at all about our implementations here at UC Davis, please send me an email. Okay, so it starts off in 1961. Our second chancellor of UC Davis, Chancellor Emil Marak, instructed his planners to build a bicycle riding tree-lined campus. And if you've ever been to Davis, you'll find out very quickly that the planners and everyone after Chancellor Marak really followed that request to a T. They did so in the 1963 Long-Range Development Plan, and everyone has taken that exact that charge of his very, very seriously ever since. Huge oak trees all over the place, tons of bike paths. We had the first bike lane in America in the city of Davis, and we've duplicated the vast majority of those forward-thinking actions in the city and in the campus, working in tandem. So on the left here, you have a picture, 1966, UC Davis, only 5 years after Chancellor Marak made that decree, that mandate. And you can see those beautiful bikes all lined up in a row. And it's prettier in black and white, I'll admit, because you look at 2017, that's when this photo on the right was taken. We still have a ton of bikes. We have about 20,000 bicyclists on campus during peak hours. But it's, given that the population itself has absolutely exploded, we have about 45,000 people on campus at any time of the day. During the actual class time, we have a whole lot of bikes to move around, to hold steady, and a lot of racks to clean up. So we started off with not necessarily good bike parking back in the day. We had these concrete pods, which are basically a wheel well and a little eyelet screws so you could potentially lock your bike up with it. There are still a few of these on campus, not because that we like to use them, they're wheel benders, they don't provide good security, but because they're often they're just in areas where people can park their bikes temporarily while actually staring at the bikes. They're not in any way suggested as a secure bike parking. We're still trying to get rid of them, of course. Then we have the grid rack or the comb rack, which was mentioned just a bit earlier. We have our inverted U's. Now, these aren't the AP/BP inverted U's. Originally, when these started getting put on campus, they thought they'd be a great idea, but since they didn't really support that much of the bicycle, we had a lot of bicycles rolling around, especially if people use long chains, coiled cables, etc. So these effectively bollard-style bike racks were discontinued. Down to the bottom left there, we have what we call the coat hanger rack. I'm personally a fan of these because they're already installed and thus don't cost money. They do allow someone to lock up one wheel and the frame directly to the rack, and it holds the bike up pretty well. It's not as high dense as the later racks that we ended up adopting, but they get the job done for now. When it comes to replacing bike racks with the newer standards, this is probably one of the last ones we're going to replace. Next up, we have what is on the majority of the campus right now. This is about 70% of all campus bike racks are the lightning bolt rack. That's the bottom row, middle right there. It has the wheel well. It allows you to lock up, depending if you go front end or back end, the rear wheel or the front wheel with your frame, front triangle or rear triangle. It is easily usable with a U-lock, which is our primary lock that we advise people use. And it's actually the current standard of the majority of the city of Davis as well. And I'll get into the value of that. Next, we have the varsity rack. This is one that Ground Control produces. It effectively does the exact same thing as the lightning rack, except it staggers a lot better. It seems to get in a lot more density. But since the security aspect is effectively exactly the same, we're not looking to use those to replace the lightning bolt racks until we've replaced all the other bad bike racks on campus. So we have a quick question here. How do you fairly and equitably offer very limited indoor storage to students? We have very limited storage indoors because on the University of California campus, the most valuable thing here isn't actually the dollar, it's square footage. It is hard to find square footage to put anything, office space, general storage, etc. So we only have one bike cage available, and that's in our northern parking structure at the Memorial Union. And I think we have 40 spaces in there, and we offer a very, very cheap annual cost for that. But that's not all around campus. In my opinion, that's best used for people who are driving to campus or taking the bus to campus and then pick up their bikes. I'll get more to that comment in a bit. So more responsibilities. That big photo you see there is one of our 3 storage areas where we store impounded bikes. Because the issue is once you get so many people biking on campus, eventually you're going to find out that very few people actually purchase bikes that are meant for long-term transportation. Instead, they're buying novelty toy bikes at Walmart, Target, et cetera, your Magnas and Roadmasters, and unfortunately even your Schwinn's and all the other companies that license out their names for a couple extra dollars. The bicycles don't last that long, especially through the wet season. So they get abandoned once the chains get rusty, and the students don't want to pay the cost to actually have all of that kept up or repaired because it often costs more than the value of the bicycle. So we end up tagging, impounding, auctioning the bicycles that go in unclaimed. That room you see right there probably has about 700, 800 bikes in it. We impound about 5,000 bikes a year, auctioning off around 900 to 1,000. Others that don't get auctioned off and still continue to go unclaimed are either donated to local 501c3s who want to fix them up, in kind of like a wrench and ride thing. And the bikes that aren't even claimed by the 501c3s get scrapped and recycled. We impound the bikes for 60 days before we sell. California law says we're supposed to hold them for at least 30, so we go by 60. We want to be ultra safe in the way that we handle other people's property until the time it's actually sold. Proper use of bike racks. If you are putting in bike racks, especially in the numbers that we do, we have 30,000 bike parking spaces on campus, campus-wide, including housing, which I don't personally control, unfortunately. You have to teach people how to lock up and with what to lock up. Teach them how best to use a chain, not just have, loop it around and have it sag down to the bottom. Why? Because bolt croppers can be used a lot easier when someone's putting their weight on it against the concrete. So you want to have everything high and tight. I always say lock it right and keep it tight. When it comes to our bicycle parking expansion, we're funded, in fact, my entire program here is funded by citation revenue, the majority, and partially by parking revenue. Now, we still bring in some revenue in the actions of our bike team. So the auction brings in money. We sell California bicycle licenses, which most people know as bicycle registration. And then there is a charge for retrieving a bicycle that has been impounded. Another thing you got to know is latent bicycle parking demand exists. Let's say on one side of campus, you have a bunch of great bicycle parking. You have a couple new buildings without that much bike parking, and thus you only have 5 or 6 bicycles parking outside of a building. Well, you don't think that you want to have 100% occupancy, so you put 5 or 6 more. Well, you're going to find those filled up very, very, very quickly. If you are suggesting people ride their bikes and you're really good at getting people to ride their bikes, remember, you will indeed need a lot of bike parking. How much? More than you think. UC Davis does require the California bicycle license, a bicycle registration on the campus. It's somewhat lax enforcement, but that will be changing once we implement our in-person bicycle citation diversion program that we're working on with the city. We have an online one, but we want to try to get more people in class. That way they can ask questions. Let's see. So this is where we stand when it comes to bike racks on campus. I mentioned we have 30,000 bicycle parking spots, right? Look on the right. That's our legend. This is our GIS compilation of where every single bike parking spot is on campus. There are a lot of different standards. Sometimes people have installed them on their own. You can see in housing clusters, they will pull in their own bike rack standards because, again, the campus core doesn't really control that. You'll see the triangle with the tealish blue color is the lightning bolt rack, and you'll see that in the vast majority of the areas. And then the varsity, we're just getting those in there to replace some of the older standards. Now, it took quite a while to get this map created. It was a massive amount of effort to go out there, count the actual number of spots, get the actual latitude and longitude, get that map, get photos of the areas. And even now we're going back and renaming some of these because the naming system wasn't 100% accurate. But we're still using this to schedule out the replacement of obsolete bike racks with the varsity racks that we have in stock. And to answer Meredith's question real quick, we secure the impounded bikes, the vast majority of them, in the bottom floor of one of our parking structures. Since that's space that we can control, that's been the long time historical use of that space. All right, so the key tips from me. Number one, when you're asked what comes first, the bicyclist or the bike parking, it's always the bike parking. Because if you enforce with any kind of regularity, or if you have any expectation that bike theft might happen, bicyclists won't park their bikes in insecure areas. So you have to put in the racks. You put in the racks, it's an invitation. We want bicyclists here. Sometimes it's difficult to convince people that they actually want bicyclists there, but then they find out they take up a lot less space and spend up just about as much money as someone driving an automobile. Remind them of that. They take up less space, they spend good money. Put the bike parking in, the bicyclists will come. How much bike parking should I install for this type of building? As much as you can squeeze out of the planners. Additionally, we're moving to a new philosophy here at UC Davis. If we're going to have a contractor build a building, well, then that entire area around that building has to be renovated as well. If there's a sidewalk there, well, you'll have to expand that sidewalk to a nice 10 feet wide instead of our original standards of 4 or 5 feet. The landscaping, the bike racks, and we're looking at doing bike parking lots, not just onesie, twosie here and there, because again, there is always going to be latent bike parking demand. You don't understand how much people actually want to ride their bikes until it's fully facilitated. Which bike parking options are the best? I'd say follow the APBP guidelines. Your post and loop, your inverted U, the lightning rack, or the varsity dock, they meet the standards. Here's the catch. Not all of them are easy to understand. So when you have a wheel well, you can roll your bike up and it's immediately obvious where you're going to lock up. If it's post and loop, when it's a inverted U, Sheffield staple, whatever, hoop, it's not immediately obvious how you should be placing your bike, which is why you might get a lot of bad parking, either instead of lining up parallel with the inverted U, going perpendicular to it. Other major tips here. I said it again, I said it in the past, I'll say it again, please tell people how to lock up their bikes and which locks are good or bad. I say preach the gospel constantly. Coiled cables are not security. They hold your bike up and not even that well. You want a good chain or good U-lock. Do your best to synchronize your bike parking standards with your neighboring areas. Other cities, campuses, apartment communities, it matters. Because if you have the same type of bike parking and it meets these APBP standards, then you're only teaching your population once. If the campus can teach people how to lock up, and when everyone leaves the campus to go to downtown or markets, etc., and they see the same bike racks, you're going to get the same kind of orderly and secure parking that you would on campus. And if you're looking into dockless bike share, consider how those bikes will actually park on campus. We brought Jump here to the Sacramento area, and they have an integrated U-lock in the back. Jump was previously known as Social Bicycle. So if you know their technology, it has an integrated U-lock. And thus it immediately tells people this is supposed to be locked up. And if you enforce your requirements that people lock up only in bicycle parking areas to official bike racks, it becomes immediately obvious to your population. If they don't have locks or the ability to latch to a piece of furniture, bike parking hardware, then you're missing out on the potential immediate understanding of control. Okay, here's my information again. I got a couple questions in the chat here. So Jessica asked, what standards or ratios are you using for racks? For racks per bed, I think we're looking at 75%. 75%. So if you got 100 beds in a housing building, then we want 75 bike racks. And since we also build in a lot of extra green space, we have the opportunity to expand just in case. Enrollment down for Crystal in a rural campus. And so vehicle parking is not an issue. I see value in expanding and updating lockups. How do I approach the university about getting on board? Well, you talk about bike theft, and that's kind of an issue right there. First, you say that a vehicle is important. Your means of transportation defines your economic capabilities. And if someone does not bring a car to campus and their means of transportation is their bicycle, we need to treat the security of that bicycle with the same importance that we would someone's Honda Civic. And if that's the case, we need to offer, at the very least, standard racks in density in highly visible areas so that we can get a lot of that passive surveillance from passerbys. If you see someone with bolt croppers at a bike rack in the middle of a quad, people are going to respond to that and call the cops, especially if you tell people to report these. Of course, never ask them to intervene. The other thing to point out is that the cost of parking is really expensive. If you tell people that the best way to get around is by bike or by bus, and you see that you need to expand automobile parking supply less frequently in the future, then you're saving money. And that's one of the reasons why we do the job here. It costs about $60,000 to $65,000 per parking stall to build a parking structure on a UC campus over here. So we are deferring all of those expenses in favor of promoting bicycle parking and transit usage. Let's see, bicycle registration. Oh, this is one of my big pet peeves. I still wish we had VIN numbers for bicycles, because serial numbers themselves are exceedingly difficult to track, and they're not always in the same spots, and they're hard to read, etc. So bicycle registration is somewhat difficult to do. If you're in California, there is an ad hoc system, the California Bicycle License, through the Department of Motor Vehicles. It has a long room to go to be great, though. I think it's Project 529 recently absorbed the National Bike Registry, and they have a really good system if you want to check them out. It's not 100% up to our par. We like to be able to put confirm someone's bicycle information and put the sticker on to ensure that they at least have possession of the bicycle. But last time I spoke to them, they do have a function to facilitate that. It's definitely worth looking into. Any tips on handling e-bikes, e-scooters, and mopeds? No, we don't allow charging for e-bikes or e-scooters or anything of that sort right now. In fact, we will soon be implementing a $10 per month electric vehicle charging additional permit to a regular parking permit should people want it. The problem is that we don't want people to be effectively bringing in some sort of taxable income by us giving them fuel, and that electricity is the fuel. So you should charge something. Now, when it comes to the e-bikes and e-scooters, etc., the vast majority of the time, these should be chargeable at home and get people to and from where they need to go. Most of these scooters will probably go 18 miles before they need a charge, and the bikes significantly longer than that. So if someone wants to charge up on your campus, it's likely because they don't want to spend the pennies to do so at home. I say have them spend the pennies, because otherwise you're spending tens of thousands of dollars facilitating it with proper, safe, and enforced charging facilities for e-bikes and scooters. And it's, aside from the secure location in the bike parking garage, does Davis have any indoor bike parking? No, we're actually just building more cages in the parking structures. Those are what we're suggesting at the moment to be your long-term parking. If you're only using your bike after you get to campus by a bus or by a car, then you definitely don't want that better quality bike outside. Then go ahead and subscribe to using one of our bike cages. We've considered putting them elsewhere, but we're hoping that the demand for bike share for people who are concerned about the security of their bike on campus will cover that same market. Have we, or could we recommend any covered outdoor bike racks? I can't speak specifically.
As I say, I can actually jump in there if you want.
Do it.
On our website at Ground Control, usually when you say covered outdoor bike racks, there's not bike racks per se built, but we offer shelters, and then you would install the bike racks underneath. Some that we offer on our website are the curve, the pinnacle, and the slope. So, a few different designs, and so depending on what you want to accomplish on that one.
And I would concur.
All right. I think there was maybe one question I saw, and stop me if you did answer this one, was from Lisa, said, are you all having issues with scooters parking at bike racks, though they do not need to be locked, taking up bike parking? How are you dealing with that? I can let you give your response, but on my end, I would say, honestly, signage, of course, always helps. And then just, of course, got to do a plug since we're from Ground Control. We have this amazing product called the Skate Dock, which also works with scooters. And if you install one of those, again, in a proper area or in conjunction with your bike racks, that may also, cut back on them using up the bike parking since they have the appropriate parking for it.
From the UC Davis perspective, yes, I do like the Skate Dock. It does hold a number of the different types of scooters. With the e-scooters that are out, I've had some. This is actually the first year I've had inquiries about them, parents buying them for their kids for one reason or the next. I'm advising people to lock up either at the skate docks or at the actual bike racks. If they weren't riding a scooter, then they'd be riding a bike. So it's not as though they're, just taking up a random bike spot and not using it for transportation. The problem is that there are exceedingly few of these electric scooters that facilitate any kind of latch to or lock to capability. So if anyone asks you, can I lock up this scooter? You might have to actually look up the manufacturer information on it to see if there's a means of using even a cable lock if necessary. Now, of course, these are going to cost more than a lot of people's Target or Walmart bikes. So always still suggest a U-lock or a good chain and keeping it tight. But yeah, we are suggesting that people lock up their electric scooters at bike racks on this campus. Not that we have too many of them as of yet.
And I'll say I can definitely add to that as well, that here at Ground Control, we're in the middle of working on, with all the electric scooters, bikes, the swarm that's coming in with all of them. We're looking into parking options for those, since there really aren't any good options, especially for the electric scooters right now.
Let's see. Access to the cages is currently restricted to users and administrators of the program. So we use an RFID card entry, and so badge access. There is an issue with that because we have to update those manually. We're in the middle of changing the tech out, and we're hopefully going to have it done by this next summer, so that this cage and all future cages will be internet accessible via a single PC in our office here for maximum security. We don't want anyone to be able to jump in there and open up that door or put in a fake code. So however good that the security is here on campus, being that we're dealing with people's property, we go an extra step there.
And I saw Kristen's comment about recently designing their own covered outboard or outdoor bike parking shelter. I can't recommend a firm. Ramon, do you know anyone that does specialty shelters?
I know that I think it's DuoGuard is in the industry, so they're worth looking into. But since a shelter itself, if you're just looking at creating a roof that maybe has some solar-powered LED lighting underneath, and thus a battery pack in one of the legs, that might be something that your campus facilities management or trades groups might be able to sort out on their own. I'd say give them the opportunity and let them surprise you first, and then start looking at the industry.
Yeah, it sounds like that's what they did, creating it internally on campus. Christine, I might follow up with you afterwards. I have a couple ideas for you of some other companies we work with that may be helpful. So maybe I can send them your way at Boise State. I'll reach out. Cool. Well, that puts us at the hour mark. So I wanted to thank our speakers again so much, Michael and Ramon. That was really awesome and a ton of information. So if you joined late, we did record this and we'll be posting it both to the Ground Control website and to the League's website. We also have a lot of bicycle-friendly universities on bike parking and a ton of other topics at bikeleague.org/universities. Check out our FAQ and resources page there for a whole lot of other really important topics ranging from education and encouragement events to the infrastructure issues like bike parking and planning and funding and staffing and all of those things. So the League is here as a resource. Ground Control is here as a resource. And Ramon, thank you for sharing your experience and expertise and your email address with everybody. So again, thanks to everyone who attended today, and thanks again to our speakers and host.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Have a good one all.
Bye.